On my own, I offer that if you have a city contract, that I will not accept a donation from you. But I don't want to exclude citizens that are involved in our community, that may work for companies that care about our community from making donations. But the most important thing is, you should not be allowed to give a donation if you have a contract, and particularly an excessive contract.
You've got to have a procurement policy overall. That procurement policy has to have barriers associated with it so that undue influence doesn't occur. Otherwise, what you end up with is you'll end up with organizations structuring bids for you.
Back to the Inspector General process. If you decide and define the bid in the exact right way, and there's transparency in the design, and then there's just transparency in the way that the bids are analyzed, and then there's transparency in the way that it's actually done, you create a separation so that when the mayor makes a selection, it's based on who's going to do the best thing for the right reason for the city and not who made a campaign contribution.
Well, a few simple steps. The first is that everyone in my administration, the lead folks, will have to release their tax returns to me so I can check their tax returns and make sure that there's nothing undue or improper happening. Second is that we will have a conflict of interest policy. You know, one of the basics of operating any business is that you have to have a segregation of duties, so that you make sure that there are multiple people checking in on every step of the process to ensure that corruption doesn't happen. And then last is, again, the Office of Inspector General. You know, there's been some controversy because the current OIG has been looking at contracts even before they're let out. Well, I think that's appropriate to ensure that there isn't corruption in contracting.
As everyone has said, the Inspector General is a great idea to work with the city government to ensure that there's no corruption. However, we have to keep in mind that not everyone in politics is corrupt. I served for 13 years as a judge. At the time, you always had the consideration of lawyers making contributions to judges. I did not have any question of impropriety during my duties as a judge, and I will bring that same honesty and integrity to City Hall.
I have said that from conception through completion, we're going to invite the public and the Inspector General into the entire process. Most importantly, when the scoring process takes place. You're entitled to know what the scores are, why they were, and why the mayor makes a decision. In my case, we're also going to make sure that everybody who comes to work in the Coig administration, day one that they come on, signs a personal code of ethics with a civil penalty in it.
Well, a very important role, and in a number of different areas, as I've addressed earlier. First of all, making sure that a request for proposal for a procurement process is actually for a professional service. This system's been abused. We've used professional service approaches to things that are actually not professional service contracts, and municipal auditorium being the most obvious. Then helping design the process. Secondly, helping make sure that the analysis of the awards is done correctly. And then finally, and most importantly, that making sure that every contractor is doing exactly what it is that they're supposed to do. You
know, I agree heavily with Mitch. The OIG has to play a detailed role. It has to be inside of the administration and able to see what's going on. Shine the light on the happenings inside the administration. I go a step further and note that when Mayor Nagin engaged in contracting processes that violated the city charter, I filed a lawsuit against him to force him to abide by the charter. Because I truly believe that if we don't fix this contracting process, if we don't get over corruption, then we don't move the city forward.
The duties of the Inspector General are quite clearly defined to root out corruption, fraud, and waste within city government. They're to hold the departments and employees to the highest ethical standards. And I think that is the way you handle professional services contracts, to assume that we will work with the Inspector General in any instances where there is even a hint or a taint of any improper conduct.
The Inspector General's role is to inspect, review, and report. I have said since the beginning of this campaign he will be invited in, along with the public, from conception through completion of all contracts in every aspect of City Hall, to guard your money.
My interest in the Inspector General will be on the cost accounting side for efficiency, but also on the compliance side, which I have a compliance officer in my own company for corruption and investigation. So I see two elements, one being legal and one being accounting, and working in partnership on the accounting side, and then referring things to them on the legal side.
You know, I have a significant amount of experience working in the defense industry, and the oversight organizations have always been an important element in the success of the defense industry. And those oversight organizations really focus on three things, and I think that's what the Inspector General should in this case. It is waste, it is fraud, and it is abuse.
First, you have to understand the charter. Let me give you some examples where they do play fast and loose. The city attorney has not fulfilled her responsibility. She represents the citizens of New Orleans, not the mayor's office. The mayor has his own executive council. We're going to have a city attorney who understands that obligation. We have a chief administrative officer who should be almost a city manager. Instead, again, it has become part of the mayor's personal staff. We're not going to do that. But what it requires, Katie, is somebody who understands the rules and wants to enforce the rules.
The city charter, while it is the letter of the law, it is too broad and gives too much flexibility within parameters. The best way to deal with that is to have my city attorney visit with all the previous city attorneys and also the academics to review those that want to advocate for charter change. I think we'll look at all the concepts for charter change. Any of those that make sense for the moment, we should be able to implement within 2 years.
Well, I believe in, like Dallas does, they have it every 10 years, they do a charter review cycle. So I think that you keep the charter fresh that way. But also, I'm a believer in you treat the public's assets as if they were, precious assets of your family and not as some other amorphous entity.
This is really just a matter of leadership and just following the rules. You have the same problem with the enforcement of zoning laws. You have the same problem with whether something is a professional service contract or not, and you have something about whether you're going to break the number of cars that people should bring home. You just have to follow the rules.
With all due respect to Mitch, I think it's not just about enforcement. I think it's also the fact that we have to change the charter. On the enforcement side, there are some great rules in the charter. I mentioned that under the charter, I filed a lawsuit against Ray Nagin to force him to act right around these contracts in the city of New Orleans. But on the other side, we have to reform the charter process because there aren't enough teeth to ensure that contracts are let out fairly and properly.
I believe that when the citizens elect a mayor, you're expecting someone with the highest ethical standards to come in and someone that you can trust. That's what we expect, someone who you can trust and someone who will abide by the law. I think that's where you find the teeth in the charter. If we're going to look at any changes to the charter, a revision may be appropriate. It's been 15, 20 years since we've had a revision.
I think it's simple. It's that you have to make sure that every bit of information is available. So I've mentioned already that we would have a system so that all city contracts and all city documents almost immediately went onto the city website.
Very much the same, making sure that contracts, the bidding process is clear and open. We put a lot of it online, and also having an efficient and competent city attorney that understands the importance of public records requests and that they are timely responded to.
I think it starts with a philosophy. The philosophy is those records are the public's. We need to figure out how to make them more available at every stage of the proceedings. I've watched it develop to where it's a struggle between an administration and the public over what to turn over. The presumption should be that everything is there for the public to review, and it needs to be turned over quickly and efficiently.
The world is changing fast, so we have to keep up with all the new technologies that they're going to invent. Right now it's technologies, computers. They should be available. You should be able to access public records, and that's the way we'll do today. But the future, we'll just have to continually change and make it more available to the public.
I'm a believer in online availability of all public records, all public documents, all emails, etc. I also, though, have had the benefit of seeing the CAPSTAT program, which is an accountability and tracking system that's being used in Washington, D.C., which is something I want to implement here.
First of all, everything should be online that's available. Secondly, we're going to have data points that track our progress that the citizens can see. Thirdly, the budget is going to be online. And fourthly, all the contracts are going to be online.